Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined, as always, by the managing editor of Horns247, the one and only Taylor Estes. Taylor, we are now less than 2 weeks from the start of the Texas Longhorns football season. We are actually approaching week 0 in college football. Casey Thompson and the Nebraska Cornhuskers are playing this Saturday in Dublin, Ireland. How did we not get that assignment?
I don't know. I have no idea. But the good thing is, Chip, is football is almost here. So it's almost hard not to, worry about the things we don't have and be excited about what we do have, which is a football season coming up. And as you mentioned, I think when do they play? Saturday? It's
Saturday,
in Ireland.
11:30 a.m. from Dublin.
Yeah, Casey's been talking a lot about the talent differentials and depth between Texas and Nebraska. So I guess
Uh-oh.
we'll all see it on display this Saturday.
That's right. Time to
Yeah.
stop talking and start doing. And speaking of starting talking or stop talking and start doing, we had an emergency podcast when it was announced that Quinn Ewers would be the starting quarterback for the Texas Longhorns. If you have not listened to that, it's a masterpiece, people. So get over to the Flagship Podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast, whether it's Apple, Spotify, whatever, and check that out. And while you're at it, check out the interview we did with Joel Klatt, Fox lead college football analyst, talking about all things Texas, Big 12. He even has some interesting thoughts about Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M. That seems to be making the rounds, gone viral, as they say. And of course, Joel always has a thought or two about the general landscape and future of college football. So make sure you check that out, kids. And today, we are going to sink our teeth into what Steve Sarkisian said on Monday when he talked about his decision to name Quinn Ewers the starting quarterback, Taylor. And of course, that just blinding arm talent that Quinn Ewers has that made him the number 1 recruit in the 2021 recruiting cycle. But I also thought it was interesting that Steve Sarkisian talks about it's the quarterback's job to give the team, coaches, and players hope and belief that they're going to win games. And he felt like Quinn Ewers checked that box as well, Taylor.
Yeah, he did. And he, the other thing that he did mention as one of the reasons that he did go with Quinn Ewers over Hudson Card is Quinn Ewers' passing ability, which is, Chip, what we've been kind of talking about a lot this offseason. Now, it wasn't, a knock on Hudson Card's passing ability, but I think it all kind of played back into the fact of the style of offense that Steve Sarkisian wants to run. He tried to run it last year at Texas, probably unsuccessfully. If you look at the record, the offense was successful though at times, but still, the quarterbacks he did have on hand were more dual threat quarterbacks that would fit more into like a spread style of offense, which is not what Steve Sarkisian runs. So Quinn Ewers says, we've said it, I mean, ad nauseum basically right now. If you go back to December of 2021, how many times we talk about the fact that Quinn Ewers is the prototypical type of quarterback that Steve Sarkisian would ultimately always want to have at his disposal with the style of offense that he does run. So, yeah, I mean, I think the timing of, I was a little surprised that Steve Sarkisian announced it prior to the second scrimmage of fall camp, Chip, personally. But at the same time, I think, Steve Sarkisian really wanted everybody to stop asking, even inside the locker room, that's kind of a distraction a little bit as they're entering, game week prep. So I don't think it was too big of a shock. I would say the timing was a little bit of a shock, but I mean, what was your takeaway on what Steve Sarkisian had to say about the whole decision-making process?
Yeah, he said that when he said to the media on on Thursday that he had a pretty good idea who his starting quarterback was going to be, but he wanted to. He said, but these guys are competing, and so he was gonna let it play out, and then he said he woke up the next morning. There was a practice that morning, and he told the quarterbacks after that practice what his decision was going to be. And he said he felt good about it. Now, the interesting thing is, Taylor, and I said this when we did the emergency podcast, I think he wanted not only everyone on the team to know, but he wanted to see how Quinn Ewers handled being the starting quarterback in that scrimmage. And he completed, according to Steve Sarkisian, he completed a high percentage of passes, threw a couple of touchdown passes, but also suffered a couple of interceptions and took a safety when they were coming off their own 1 yard line. And I give Steve Sarkisian credit for talking about the interceptions. He kind of broke them down. He said that the first was a protection breakdown that caused Quinn Ewers' pass to be hurried. And the second was, he said, a bad third down matchup. So listen, we've talked about the fact that Quinn Ewers had some interceptions in the spring. Um, and he's had interceptions in fall camp. So is Hudson Card. But what Steve Sarkisian said, the most important, he said, and this is critical, he said, the most important thing is Quinn Ewers the next 5 days, meaning this week, leading up to game week, as you mentioned. How comfortable can he get in the coaches identifying exactly what he's most comfortable with and in what down and distances, so that they can put this game plan together for Louisiana Monroe and then continue to help him grow, help him build the things that he does well, so that playbook expansion continues as this season gets going. In other words, Quinn Ewers needs to be a completely different quarterback by the time we get to game 6 than he is on September 3rd. And it needs to be a lot better because, as Steve Sarkisian said, and this was the first thing he said, Taylor, and I felt like Texas fans may or may not hear this, when Sarkisian said, we're going to have growing pains. We're going to have growing pains. We're
Come
we're
on,
not.
Texas fans are gonna hear that, Chip, let's be real here.
Oh yeah. Well, they're going to see it whether they hear
Yeah,
it or not. But
yeah.
he said we're not only relatively young at quarterback, we're a relatively young team. And so, folks, that means next year. But no, we'll see. I mean, let's see what Quinn Ewers can do, because he's an unbelievable talent. I mean, we talked about Glenn Smith, the former Cowboys assistant coach. He's an assistant in the USFL right now. He coached the Cowboys when Troy Aikman was there. He's helped develop quarterbacks in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He's very familiar with Quinn Ewers, and he's been to APAC in Fort Worth, where he trains, where Patrick Mahomes trains, and he talks about this kid's ability to put the nose of the football, meaning an absolutely tight spiral, into tiny windows, and how difficult that is, and not having his feet set like Mahomes, that he can sling it while falling backward, he can sling it while moving, which is huge, I think, for uh, when you're starting to think about an offensive line that's going to have some new faces, freshmen, potential breakdowns, talk about growing pains. You better have a quarterback who can slide, who can get out of the pocket, you can roll the pocket, you can bootleg and waggle and get him on the move throwing that football, because if he's as accurate on the move as he is standing in the pocket, aka Colt McCoy, then you got a chance, because we saw Colt McCoy do wonders in 08 and 09 with not much on the offensive line in front of him. So we're not there yet. I'm not comparing Quinn Ewers to a 2008 or 9 version of Colt McCoy. Far from it. I mean, if you go back and look at freshman years of quarterbacks at Texas, um, Shane Buechele is probably the last one that you'd look at and say, okay, that's kind of a similar comparison.
Mhm.
Um, Buechele did pretty well and still didn't throw for 3,000 yards, but Quinn Ewers, you don't know what to say about what his ceiling or what kind of numbers this guy could put up because he throws that deep ball so well, Taylor. I get a feeling we're going to have some real highlights this year on deep ball touchdowns because Quinn Ewers is special at, and Glenn Smith talked about getting that nose of the football to just descend right into the hands of the receiver, which Shane Buechele was really good at. Some guys throw a flat line deep ball where the nose of the football is still pointed toward the marching band
Right.
when the receiver catches it. This guy can drop it in the bucket, and I think it's going to be there's going to be some car accident type plays, but there's going to be some dynamic highlight reel type plays, and we'll see if this defense can be any better this year to help keep Texas in some of these games.
Yeah, and I mean everything you're saying. I mean that's exactly what you have heard about Quinn Ewers as a recruit. But the problem is, and just all off season, the problem is we haven't seen it in years. I mean that's the reality. That's not a knock on him or anything, but with him, reclassifying to the 2021 signing class and him not playing that senior year of high school, it's kind of easy and then even his junior year having that injury too where he missed a lot of games, it's kind of easy to forget the type of things that he was able to do. And I know it's a totally different ballgame when you're talking about high school and college, but I think, I mean, when you compare it to Shane Buechele, excuse me, um, Shane Buechele in 2016, his freshman year starting, he completed 236 passes for 391 yards, 11 interceptions, but almost 3,000 yards. If you're a Texas fan, Chip, would you take those numbers for Quinn Ewers in year one?
Yeah, I mean 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. I think he'll throw for more touchdowns than that. Um,
Yeah, and hopefully he's not on a 5-7 team too. That was the other thing with Shane Buechele was on a
and
five
I,
and
I
seven
think
team.
Quinn Ewers will be over 3,000 yards passing is if he stays healthy and plays, as the starter for all 12 regular season games. And you're hoping Texas is bowl eligible and he'll get a 13th game. So yeah, I think those are the kinds of numbers that you're looking at, and you could draw a fair comparison for Quinn Ewers because Sam Ellinger's freshman year, he split time with Shane Buechele in 2017. And then in 2018, Ellinger's, sophomore who's had uh, 6 starts under his belt. So I think that Shane Buechele comparison is probably the right one. You mentioned it, 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 2,900 and 58 yards passing. I do think Quinn Ewers will be over 3,000 yards passing because I think this kid's special when it comes to delivering the football. And, the biggest thing for him, Taylor, and this is where Steve Sarkisian said it, he said, we have got to put him in the right position. We have to identify what he does best and make sure that we're, putting him in those plays, not getting him in situations where he doesn't know what he's looking at and making the big mistake and losing confidence. You don't want that. And that's the one thing I think Steve Sarkisian is going to look at and say, because um, we talked about the pick sixes that Hudson Card threw last week in the first scrimmage and in that open Tuesday practice, and whether or not Steve Sarkisian had flashbacks to the Kansas game. Quinn Ewers, we got to see how he handles adversity, and really this whole team. I mean, everyone's asking me, how's Texas? How's Texas? We don't know. We won't
Yeah.
know until we see them confronted with adversity, how they handle it. Do they come together? Do they look, down at their shoes? What are they doing? And Quinn Ewers is going to be a big part of the mojo on that offense, even with all that skill talent. Bijan Robinson, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington. How Quinn Ewers carries himself is going to uh, greatly impact those guys and how they approach it and how this team feels. Rod Wright talked about seeing Vince Young in that Oklahoma State game back in 2005 when they were, trailing big at halftime, and Vince Young came out, ran for 80 yards and a touchdown. And Rod Wright was like, okay, I knew we were fine. That quarterback has a huge impact on the entire team and the entire team's belief as to whether they're going to come back in a game or take the lead in a game or keep the lead in a game. So it's going to be fun to watch because I think obviously the ceiling is enormous for Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, and we talked about this in the emergency podcast a little bit, but going back to when we had Riley Dodge on the Flagship Podcast, he did earlier this year, he did talk about Quinn Ewers always was kind of the cool, calm, and collective type of guy, to the point to where sometimes Riley Dodge would have to check himself because he was more fiery than the quarterback. But that may be exactly what Texas needs. The problem is, Chip, you kind of hit it, like, earlier in what you were saying about the adversity thing. Not only do we not know how this team's going to respond to adversity, we only have basically based off of last year, but Texas has 35 new players on the roster. I mean, it's almost an entirely different team that's going to be fielded. So we don't know anything right now. All we can base it off of is what we've seen. That's not good for Texas, but the good thing is that what we, do know is there's new players, there's new blood there, and then hearing what Riley Dodge did have to say on the Flagship interview, when was that, back in the spring, I think it was, hearing about how Quinn Ewers kind of carries himself on the sideline. A part of me kind of thinks that maybe what Texas was lacking last year, and this is not me, before anybody jumps down my throat for saying this is not me knocking Hudson Card or Casey Thompson, but either way, both of them were kind of, first year starters, even though Casey Thompson did have some experience. And I'm not sure that they knew how to be that leader on the field. And so this is going to be really fascinating to see how Quinn Ewers does it once he, does actually take the field at Texas. But they're going to have to figure it out pretty short, Chip, because Alabama comes to town week 2. And I think that one thing that, if you're a Texas fan out there, what you don't want to see is what happened to Hudson Card against Arkansas in week 2 of the 2021 season, where things started breaking down and he started breaking himself down, and you've talked about it, Bijan Robinson having to kind of pick him up on the sideline, being like, hey, you can't sit with your head down. That I don't think is necessarily a Hudson Card thing. I think that's a young player thing. Now, what you're hoping is if Alabama comes out and, likely, I think is, and most people are going to expect them to win. But if things start going in the opposite direction of Texas, how Quinn Ewers is going to react to it. And I think we all will see that, how he's going to be on the sideline when things are not going his way when Alabama comes to town. Because I think it's almost certain that that's almost probably going to play out at some point.
Yeah, I mean, look, Alabama is the number 1 team in the country, and I think back to 2003 when Vince Young took the field against Oklahoma and made some amazing plays, some zigzagging runs down the field, and lost the game 65-13. I mean, if you turn the ball over against an elite team, you will get run.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a real possibility that that's going to happen against Alabama. I'm not saying it will, but it could, because Alabama is, Nick Saban said they were rebuilding last year. They went to the national championship game and had the Heisman Trophy winner and a finalist in Will Anderson on the defensive side. They were rebuilding, according to Nick Saban. This year, they're number 1. So, look, you just want to be in it with guys who are connected to each other, to their coaches, to their school, who love football, who care about each other, care about the outcome of the game, and are willing to fight to the end. And I think that's what you're looking for. You're looking to see how that offense responds to adversity, responds to a turnover. Uh, can they come back and make plays and continue to feed that belief within that locker room? Because that's everything, Taylor. I mean, you can get beat 65-13 and go on to win a national championship, or go to a Rose Bowl the next year and win a national championship 2 years later. If that belief is in there, and that confidence, and that willingness to fight to the end and learn from the mistakes, so that you're not making the same mistakes twice. Because there's a lot of really interesting young talent on this team. And, everyone knows about Xavier Worthy and Jordan Whittington, Bijan Robinson. But how about Steve Sarkisian saying that sophomore tight end Jatavian Sanders has not only the most improved player from a year ago, but has the best hands on the team.
Yeah, I like how he kind of said, like, I know that Bijan and Xavier are not going to be too happy with this comment before he did say that. But yeah, he said that. You're right.
And that's another guy. And look, and this is why I asked Steve Sarkisian this question about his flex tight ends, his tight ends, period. With Isaiah Nayer going down with that season-ending knee injury, is it possible that one of your tight ends is among the top 3 pass catchers on your team? Just from a confidence level, from a coach's confidence in that player as a pass catcher. And he said, we like our tight ends. We like them a lot. Feel really good about that group. And that's a question mark group, because we know Cade Brewer was doing the dirty work at that position last year. Now it's going to be new faces. You bring in Jaleel Billingsley from Alabama as a flex tight end. Your 2 H-back blocking tight ends are Jatavian Sanders and Gunnar Helm. But Steve Sarkisian feels good about this group. So I can't wait. We know Sarkisian can find the tight end in the
Yeah.
passing game. I can't wait to see it. We haven't seen it since seems like David Thomas, but
I'm saying, I don't know in my career or when I was even a student at Texas if there was a major impact tight end. I mean, I can't think of one. Can you?
no, I mean it's been sort of a, well, it's been like a lot of things about Texas football, sort of lost in the desert for the last decade. So, uh, Jatavian Sanders, obviously an unbelievable athlete, and we talked about Jeff Banks, the tight end special teams coordinator, getting on him, just really getting on him the first week of spring football, saying, your physicality is not where it should be, and really challenged him. And from that point forward, they've seen a more physical Jatavian Sanders, because last year at this time, it was all Gunnar Helm. Gunnar
Yeah.
Helm. I mean, Gunnar Helm was the guy who was willing to give up his body and be physical, be grimy. And then it clicked for Jatavian Sanders. Now, we got to see it in games. We saw the kid's got some hands. We saw it in the spring game. Of course, he got stripped by Jaron Thompson. But um, he can make that dynamic catch. And he changed his number from number 3 to number 0, because he said that DeMarvion Overshawn is rocking 0 so well that he wanted to rock it and be Overshown's twin. I always say Overshawn. I need to say Overshown. Overshown's twin on the other side of the ball, Taylor. But he's not going with all those little wristbands that Overshown goes with.
How much of that number change was really because Quinn Ewers came in and had
Yeah.
number 3 though?
Yeah.
But still, I
Let's
mean,
be honest.
that's a not necessarily a bad thing, and I'm excited to see what Jatavian Sanders can do, because earlier this year, Steve Sarkisian was talking about how Jatavian Sanders was more of a flex type of tight end even in high school, and then also was playing defensive line too. So having to block somebody coming in or, be anything more than just basically big body receiver, I think a lot was not in his vocabulary as a true freshman. And I think a lot of Texas fans wanted to see more out of him his true freshman year. But that type of stuff takes time. I mean, if you're playing more essentially kind of more of a hybrid wide receiver role in high school or on defense where you're trying to be the one pressuring the quarterback, not being the one to help stop it if it, that breaks down and it gets to his level there. I mean, it's a totally different skill set that he had to learn essentially and learn quickly in an elite level. And I do love that the fact that when Jeff Banks told us the story about Tavian Sanders, how he just called him out after that first spring and just called it like it was. And then he responded the way that he did. That to me tells me that this kid's going to be legit because that's something you can't teach. There are certain things in sports in general that you can't teach, and your will to, honestly, a lot of times to be like, you say I'm not doing my job, I'm going to prove to you wrong, and I'm going to be the one coming out and having the biggest turnaround. That to me speaks volumes of the type of mental player that he is, and he obviously has the physical skill set. So I'm really excited to see what Jatavian Sanders can do this year and how Steve Sarkisian utilizes him as in the tight end position.
Yeah, because think of Jared Wiley, 6'7", 251, looked like a absolute NFL tight end, but didn't like the blocking.
Mm-hmm.
Just, he was a quarterback in high school.
Right.
And some guys can get there, some guys can't. And we'll see, because there's going to be a play or two where Jatavian Sanders is going to have to block Will Anderson in that Alabama game. And look, Jatavian Sanders is an athlete. He's got great feet. He should be able to stay in front of Will Anderson and at least make it hard. He's not just going to whiff because Sanders has got great feet. And that's the other thing, is that when you come from high school and you were a flex tight end / receiver, and suddenly you've got to learn to block like an offensive lineman, it does take time. We've heard that. I mean, Steve Sarkisian said quarterback and offensive line, hardest positions to play as freshmen. Well, when you're going to be a blocking tight end, you're essentially the sixth offensive lineman,
Yeah.
and it's going to take a minute. And so I'm interested to see both Sanders and Helm, because I think Helm's getting overlooked here. He may not have, the smooth hands and, smooth release of Sanders, but Gunnar Helm he'll get in there. He'll get his face mask dirty. And I think he's also going to be a real asset to this football team going forward. And we know from watching Iowa State and some of these other programs, you can't have enough talented tight ends because they create incredible mismatch problems when you've got special ones who can get down the field and catch the football as well. So it's going to be fun. We know Steve Sarkisian is creative, can get different guys the football, and now you're going to have a quarterback in Quinn Ewers who can, make crazy throws from every arm slot without having his feet set, with defenders draped all over him. Hopefully, he just continues to get comfortable, more and more comfortable in that offense, because as we've said, Steve Sarkisian's sort of betting on himself. Ewers may not be a finished product in this offense, not even close. We know he's not.
No.
He's
And if anybody
learning.
expected that, then you need to lower your expectations a
Right.
little bit.
Right. So Steve Sarkisian is betting on himself to get his, his knowledge in the offense to grow, while keeping him in plays that he does really well early in the season, while that knowledge of the offense and comfortability grows. Like I said, by the OU game, Quinn Ewers needs to be a different quarterback than the one that starts against Louisiana Monroe. And so, student of the game, working with a great quarterback developer and offensive mind, this should be a really fun developmental relationship to watch, to say the least.
Yes, absolutely. Chip, should we talk a little bit about injuries here too
Yes.
coming? Yeah.
Yes.
So
So,
go ahead. I'll let you
no,
go.
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we haven't had a chance to touch on this yet, but I think the biggest injury news coming out of that second scrimmage that Texas fans were worried about was that of true freshman left tackle Calvin Banks. he left the scrimmage. Steve Sarkisian did say that he had an ankle injury, but said it was minor and that he probably was going to be returning to practice on Tuesday. We're recording on Tuesday right now. So that's a big one. But it sounds like everybody else pretty much for the most part is coming back, including Roshan Johnson, Cole Hudson, Troy O'Meara, and Jade Barron, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, the Kelvin Banks ankle injury y- with the big guys, you just got to keep an eye on it because those ankle and foot injuries can linger because these guys are so big. And
Mhm.
so we'll see if Calvin Banks is a quick healer or not. We've seen situations where, uh, guys play with an ankle injury and then it's, it gets worse, whatever. So you just have to watch that situation. It does sound like Banks is going to be fine, but he left that scrimmage and did not return. So we'll keep an eye on that situation because Taylor, he's going to be the starter at left tackle
Yep.
to start the season. That's the trajectory this guy's on, and he's a special talent. And I wrote about him in the Insider a couple weeks ago, and everybody needs to get over Horns 24/7 and read that because this guy he's sage and tough and smart and a leader beyond his years as a true freshman. And I can't wait to watch Big 78 grow in that role because I think Texas in a year from now, 2 years from now, is going to have just an unbelievable offensive line, and that's going to be fun to watch because you get to see it evolve. But yeah, Cole Hudson returning from an ankle injury in the very first scrimmage of fall camp is a big deal too, because this is a guy who was headed toward starting at right guard or left guard, wherever Junior Angalau wasn't. Now it's probably going to be Cole Hudson or DJ Campbell and Hayden Connor at guard, and then you got Jake Majors, who's a sophomore, and he's the veteran in that group along with Christian Jones. I don't know how long Christian Jones can hang on to a starting spot, quite honestly, Taylor, but we'll see because if Andre Carrick is not at left tackle, do you swing him over to right tackle? What about Cameron Williams, the 6'7", 374-pound freshman, who's just, I mean, they
All
were
of
talking.
6'7", 374 pounds.
Yeah. And Christian Jones, talking about how the guy is just an earth mover. So it's going to be fun to watch that offensive line. A little scary at times, I'm sure, but growing pains and knowing that there's brighter days ahead with that group because that is a talented group.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. The growing pains also, I mean, we can hit on it as much as possible to try to nail it into Texas fans, heads that are listening, but it's not just quarterback, it's across the board. And I think offensive line may have the most growing pains. Well, maybe 1A, 1B between that and quarterback. So, but you're right. The future is bright at both positions, honestly, in my opinion. And it may not be right now, but you you hope these guys can get out there and really just continue to progress, especially offensive linemen as well, because these are no scrubs. I mean, we can. Texas has signed some decent offensive linemen, but they haven't really panned out. I don't think there's any question that these guys are going to eventually pan out, but don't give up on them in year one if there are some whiffs, some growing pains, some ups and downs, because these guys, I mean, when you see them in person, it's different. It's a different style of offensive lineman that they are bringing in than what we have seen in recent years at Texas.
Week to week improvement.
Mhm.
The sign of a well-coached team is week to week improvement. Can we please see that
Yeah.
in 2022? And that leads us to the defense, Taylor. We've talked all about the offense, the quarterback, and yet the defense is still the biggest question mark for this football team based on what happened last year. And, we keep hearing, okay, You've got better linebacker play, Jalen Ford, Diamante, Tucker Dorsey, David Benda, freeing up DeMarvion Overshawn to rush the passer. Ovia Gofu's taking a step. Baron Sorrell could be a breakout player. Heck, even Ethan Burke, the 6'7" Westlake, defensive end, was getting some second team and even a couple first team reps in that open practice on Tuesday. Jatavian Sanders saying Burke is stronger at the point of attack than he thought, got beat on a play by Burke. I mean, Jamon Tapp is a guy I can't wait to see. And yet, we keep hearing about Deshaun Jameson having the camp of all camps. He keeps picking off these quarterbacks. Jaron Thompson's had some interceptions. And Taylor, I'm going to believe it all when I see it,
It's
because that
exactly how
defense
I feel.
last year was so hard to watch in the second half of football games that you really had to watch through your fingers because you just didn't know what was coming next.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think the one thing when you talk about the defense in second half of games last year, I know people don't want to hear it, but I also think that the time of possession differential in most of those games was far going against Texas, and the defense couldn't get off the field. The offense couldn't stay on the field. It was just the whole adversity striking, and it was like everybody. It was like turning the lights on and seeing the cockroaches scurry, all over the place, and that's kind of what it was because when one thing went wrong, it almost went wrong across the board, and so you hope that that won't be the case this year on defense. You hope the offense can stay on the field a little bit more if you're a Texas fan than if the defense is struggling a little bit. But I'm right there with you, Chip. I am going 100% and show me, don't tell me. And I'm not going to change my mind until you show me and don't tell me, not just for one game against Louisiana Monroe. Show me, don't tell me when later in the season, when things are tough, when you're tired, when you've been playing, the schedule that Texas has. Show me, don't tell me. That's what I'm waiting for. So you're probably not going to hear much, talk up the defense from me up until maybe mid-season, and then we can assess it later. But yeah, I mean, it's great. Everything's great in the off season. Let's see it on the field.
Yep, we're getting closer. We're getting
Mhm.
closer. All right, Taylor, we have been counting down the toughest games on Texas's schedule, and we started with the easiest. I think we agreed Louisiana Monroe, then at Kansas. Then I had TCU as the third easiest game on the
Same
schedule.
here. Mhm. We were
Um,
matching there.
and then I had at Texas Tech. And then I
I
think we
had
both,
West. I had West Virginia.
you
Or
had
no, excuse
West
me. I had Iowa State. Excuse me, at 9.
Iowa State at 9. Okay. And
Mhm.
then I think we both had UTSA
Yes,
as the fifth easiest game on Texas's schedule. Then I had West Virginia.
I had Texas Tech,
Okay. And then I had Iowa State.
and then I had West Virginia.
Okay. And then we both had Oklahoma
Yes,
as the, I guess we should say, fifth
fifth.
hardest,
Yeah, toughest. Yeah.
toughest game on the schedule. So now we are into the four hardest games on the Longhorns schedule. Drum roll. I have at number 4, Baylor. November 2nd, the
20,
defending Big 12
25th.
champion.
25th.
Oh, how am I doing?
That's the Black Friday game
That's
this
right.
year, the day after
That's the
Thanksgiving.
last game of the season.
Mhm.
Sorry. Black
25th.
Friday game against the Baylor Bears, the defending Big 12 champions. And I just think that Baylor is going to take a step back this year. Now, Taylor totally disagrees with me, and I do love Siaka Ika. I think he is he could be the most important player on that Baylor football team. The nose tackle who just is unbearable at the point of attack. I think Jake Majors has nightmares about Siaka Ika. But I've got Baylor as the fourth most difficult game for the Texas Longhorns on the schedule. Taylor, what say you?
I am disagreeing with that one. I have Kansas State as the 4th toughest, and before we started recording, I was talking to Chip, and I was like, "I feel like my number 3 and 4 could be flip-flopped either way," but, you'll hear why I don't have Baylor here coming up soon, but, yeah, I think Kansas State definitely deserves either 3 or 4 of the toughest games. It's always a tough place to play, and if I will say this, if Texas and Kansas State when they play and Kansas State has pretty much, a fairly healthy season leading into that game, then I would probably put this higher, like a more tough game than where I currently have it. But as it currently stands, I'm going to have K State at the 4th toughest game for Texas.
Okay, and I have K-State as the third most difficult game for the Texas Longhorns. Uh, for what you just said, Taylor, in addition to them having 6 preseason All Big 12 players, including Felix, I just call him Felix because I can't pronounce his last name.
I'm not even going to
The best,
try.
arguably the best pass rusher in the Big 12. They've got guys up front on the offensive line as well who are and Deuce Vaughn and Malik Knowles at receiver, and now you bring in Adrian Martinez. I don't know what to make of Adrian Martinez. The kid never led a game-winning drive in 4 years at Nebraska, had 16 lost fumbles in addition to his interceptions. Does he, his girlfriend is at K-State. He goes to K-State. Is it such a fresh start? I mean, the kid had to do everything, and there was not a lot of skill talent around him at running back, at receiver, nothing. And he's talked about that. Now, does playing for Colin Klein and having some skill guys and Deuce Vaughn there, does it just lead to this, angels singing renaissance season for Adrian Martinez? If so, watch out for K-State to win the Big 12. And I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I mean, they know that they have a team that can contend for the Big 12 title, and all these guys leave next year. They know this is it. They're going to be rebuilding next year. So Chris Kleiman, who, beat LSU in the bowl game, went 8-5 last year, had a good offseason, obviously. If K-State can get it together, watch out, because the schedule is favorable for K-State. I mean, they have to go to OU, but they get OU early. I always say, if you're going to get OU, get them early, because they tend to get better as the year goes on. We don't know what OU is going to be under Brent Venables, but K-State, they play Missouri, which is a winnable game for them. And then they're at Oklahoma to open Big 12 play. Then they get Texas Tech. Then they're at Iowa State. And then they're at TCU. I think TCU is going to be down. And they play Oklahoma State and Texas in Manhattan. To me, the Big 12, well, I shouldn't give that away right now, should I? But it wouldn't shock me if Oklahoma State and K-State are in the Big 12 championship game. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that's exactly why I was, like, kind of, like, torn for where I would wanna put Kansas State. I am putting Baylor ahead. My main reason, I mean, it's hard for me to, doubt Dave Aranda after the turnaround that you saw from Baylor between year 1 as under, him as a head coach, him realizing what was wrong on that staff, everything, making the necessary changes after 1 year, which a coordinator changes a lot of times coaches don't want to do that after 1 year because
Tom
fire your
Herman didn't want to
coordinators.
do it
Yeah,
because
you
he
fire
said the
your coordinator.
percentage. That's right. He
Yeah.
said the percentage of the head coach getting fired within the first 5 seasons goes up by 40%
Yeah, I mean,
if
there's
you change your
only
coordinator after the
how
first
many
year.
people you can point the finger at before you're pointing it back to you, in the mirror when you start firing coordinators early, and it paid off tremendously. The other thing that I do think that Baylor has working to its advantage is they return almost both lines of scrimmage, and that those both lines of scrimmage last year were instrumental in Baylor making the run to become Big 12 titles or Big 12 champions, excuse me, in Dave Aranda's second season there. So that is all of that to say. I know they lost a lot, but there's no reason for me to question Dave Aranda right now because I mean, shoot, everyone was questioning Baylor's hire of Dave Aranda in his first year. And then he went from people questioning him to Big 12 title or Big 12 champions. I don't know why I keep saying Big 12 title, Big 12 champions the following year. So I have Baylor number 3 for all of that.
Okay, number 2, the second hardest game on the Longhorns schedule. I have Oklahoma State in Stillwater on October 22nd. Taylor, I don't know how Oklahoma State did not win the Big 12 championship last year with all that defensive talent. I think Mike Gundy wakes up every night in a panic thinking, how on earth did we lose that Big 12 title game and come up an inch short? A Kevin Dyson arm, extension with the football short, an inch short of the end zone there at the end of the game. But I think the resolve inside that Oklahoma State football team, even with a new defensive coordinator, is going to be substantial. And Oklahoma State has to play at OU this year, I believe. But my point is this: I think Oklahoma State is playing for the Big 12 championship, and I think that's going to be a heck of a game for Texas up there in Stillwater on October 22nd. What say you?
Yep, I am gonna agree with you on this one. And honestly, if you go back to that Big 12 title game last year, I mean Spencer Sanders, I'm pretty sure he set the record for the most interceptions thrown in a Big 12 championship game in that game. I mean, when that's always been the thing with Spencer Sanders. When he is off, he is off. When he's on, he's good, but when he's off, it's just like look away, look away. You don't want to see what's happening right here. But yeah, I think Oklahoma State definitely has a chance to make another Big 12 title run. The reason why I'm putting this one even ahead of Baylor is because Texas goes into this game. I believe this is 8 straight games that Texas will have played before they hit the road for Stillwater. Yeah, because they play, let me make sure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so this is game number 8, and Texas does not have any bye weeks before this. I think after 7 games, of the season, facing already Alabama, facing Oklahoma, and then game 8 before a bye week, you go to Stillwater to play at Oklahoma State. That to me is the reason, even though I think Baylor may be the repeat Big 12 title champions, if right now I'll say that, but Oklahoma State, this game I think is probably ranked ahead of it for the whole fact that Texas is literally going to be, this is game 8 of the year without having a single break. So that to me kind of spells disaster from, looking at it from August to Meachip.
Yeah, Spencer Sanders, 4 interceptions in that Big 12 title game. Like I said, how did Oklahoma State lose that game? They
Right
were
there.
still
That's why.
driving for the game-winning points despite the 4 interceptions. But, I mean, if Spencer Sanders throws 3 or 2
Yeah.
or 1 interception, Oklahoma State wins that game.
And there were some of those, I remember watching some of them, I was just like, what is he doing? Like, they
Yeah,
weren't just like, oh, misread. It's like, like trying to throw
that
the ball away straight into the opponent's hands.
that is the frightening aspect of
Yeah.
Spencer Sanders. Kind of like Brock Purdy for Iowa State fans. Like, the kid was good in the regular season, had some really big games, some big moments, but it seemed like every time, every Big 12, title game, or when something was really on the line, he didn't come through. So, all right, we agree. Oklahoma State, second hardest game on Texas's schedule, the hardest game. Shocker, folks. September
Number
10th.
1 versus number 1.
No, the top-ranked Alabama Crimson Tide rolling into Austin, Texas for that 11 a.m. kickoff on September 10th. And again, make sure you listen to our flagship podcast interview with Joel Klatt, because he's going to be on the call for Fox and has some interesting thoughts about what playing a team like Alabama so early in the season can do to your fall camp mindset. And obviously, you got the defending, reigning Heisman Trophy winner in Bryce Young, and possibly the 2022 Heisman Trophy winner in Will Anderson. Enough said, Taylor.
Yeah. Hope you cover. Hope they cover. If you're a Texas fan, just hope you cover. I don't know
Yeah,
what the spread's going to be, but if it's hope, shoot, if you keep within 2 touchdowns with Alabama, you take that
take it.
as you just take it. So
All right. You ready for some love it or leave it?
I am. Before we get to love it or leave it, we're going to take a really quick break, but stay tuned because we have more football talk coming up. So we'll be right back. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will roll on here. Chip, let's get going with some love it or leave it. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, my first one for you is love it or leave it. Quinn Ewers will have more touchdown passes and fewer interceptions than Casey Thompson had last season. Casey Thompson had 24 touchdowns and 9 interceptions.
Ooh. Okay, this is interesting because for all the grief that Casey Thompson took, he did lead the Big 12 in touchdown passes and is the only quarterback in Texas history to throw for 5 touchdowns in 3 separate games, period, not just in a single season. He did it in a single season. I'm going to leave this, however, because I think Quinn Ewers could have more touchdown passes, but I think he'll have more interceptions. So I could see Quinn Ewers with 25, 26 touchdown passes, but maybe 10 or 11 interceptions. Taylor, what say you?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I think I'm also gonna leave it. I think that I agree. I think the one thing that Texas does have a little bit more working to its advantage is a little like some more weapons at receiver. So I think if you're a Texas fan, you probably hope there's more touchdown passes. But on the flip side, you're talking about a redshirt freshman who Steve Sarkisian himself on Monday this week when he was talking about Quinn Ewers, he's like, he should be a true freshman. He did say he doesn't act like a true freshman because he did have the experience being in the Ohio State program, which Steve Sarkisian spoke up very highly about. But he is still he hasn't played high school, or he hasn't even played high school football since his junior year of high school. So yeah, I think you have to expect more interceptions, but also more touchdowns too, because there's more people that you can spread the ball around to. So yeah, I'm going to leave it too.
All right, love it or leave it, number 2.
Second one is love it or leave it. Sophomore tight end Jatavian Sanders will finish the season with 30 or more receptions and at least 3 receiving touchdowns.
Okay, this is like incredibly tempting. I can't. I mean, I think he'll have at least 3 receiving touchdowns. Okay, screw it. I'm just gonna love it. I'm gonna go with Steve Sarkisian. I'm buying that Jatavian Sanders has the great hands, so I'm going to love it. This is a lot of receptions for a tight end, by the way. But Jatavian Sanders, 5-star recruit, special talent. I'm gonna love this. Taylor.
I think I'm going to leave it just to go back to what we were talking about. Like, I don't think I've ever really seen a tight end be a major difference maker. Now, I know I'm comparing apples to oranges by saying that because I'm talking about completely different coaching staffs, completely different personnel, all of that. So, but just since I haven't seen it, I'm gonna leave it because I think that 30 or more receptions seems like a lot with the other guys that may get the ball in this offense. I feel like I could maybe see 3 receiving touchdowns, but the 30 receptions is where you kind of get me there. So I'm gonna leave it.
Okay.
All right.
Love it or leave it, number 3.
Last one, love it or leave it. Steve Sarkisian will get his first signature win at Texas this season, which will come against the Oklahoma Sooners.
I mean, Sarkisian needs a signature win. He doesn't have one yet. And obviously, beating Oklahoma is always a nice elixir when it comes to the fan base. Tom Herman beat OU in year 2 with Dicker the Kicker's help in that incredible 48-45 win.
Charlie Strong beat Oklahoma in year 2 also.
There you go. So, yes, I'm loving this. I'm loving it. If Charlie Strong can do it and Tom Herman can do it, Steve Sarkisian can do it. I will love this. I think Texas beats Oklahoma and Steve Sarkisian gets his signature win. Taylor, what say you?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna love it too. There's so many questions with Oklahoma, so many changes from top to bottom, from the coaching staff all the way down to the personnel that Brent Venables has to work with, this year, and his coaching staff there. So first year head coach in general, first year head coach, not just first year head coach at OU, first year head coach, a lot of personnel changes. I think Texas will have the edge against Oklahoma, which will give Steve Sarkisian his first signature win as the head coach at Texas.
There you have it, kids. There you have it. The Flagship Podcast for this week. We are recording on Tuesday, August 23rd. We are less than 2 weeks from the start of the Longhorns football season. So get over to horns247.com for all the latest, the insider every Thursday morning. We've got all of our recruiting scoop from Mike Roach and Hudson Standish. Of course, all the team coverage from Taylor, Jeff Howe, and myself. So until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Thanks so much for listening. Stay safe and keep the faith.